Oh. The Prescott family, Reginald, Barnaby, Prudence, and Penelope, were a portrait of sickening self-satisfaction, each member meticulously crafted to embody the worst aspects of inherited privilege. They stood clustered in the cavernous ballroom of Prescott Manor, a monument to generations of accumulated wealth and casual cruelty. The chandeliers, monstrous things dripping with crystal, cast a blinding glare, reflecting off Barnaby's perpetually smug grin and Prudence's meticulously coiffed, almost aggressively perfect hair. Penelope, as always, was surgically attached to her phone, thumbs flying across the screen, undoubtedly crafting some tone-deaf post about the trials and tribulations of choosing between a private jet and a yacht for her summer vacation. You know, the struggles of the less fortunate. Oh. Well, Reginald, Barnaby drawled, the liquid in his antique glass swirling like the dirty secrets of their lineage. It appears we've weathered the storm. Just barely, of course, but weathering it nonetheless. His tone dripped with the kind of condescending arrogance only a trust fund baby could master. I swear you could practically hear the silver spoon clinking against his teeth. Reginald, a man whose face seemed permanently sculpted into a mask of disdain, puffed out his chest like a particularly pompous pigeon. Indeed, Barnaby. A few adjustments were necessary, of course, a painful trim here and there, but the Prescott legacy remains, thankfully, intact. We simply had to strategically liberate ourselves from some unnecessary assets. He glanced pointedly at a dusty corner of the room, as if referring to an invisible servant, or maybe their now-sold summer home, a place where they could actually cause damage without having to face real consequences. The casual dehumanization was second nature to them. Prudence, ever the pragmatist, or as I preferred to call her, the family's resident ice queen, cut in with the sharp efficiency of a well-oiled guillotine. The rentals are secured, the estate is momentarily safe. We can continue as before. Her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes that could freeze the very blood in your veins, never wavered. Security, for her, was a religion, and the estate was her sacred text. I stood silently in the shadows, a glass of sparkling water in my hand, a ghost in their gilded cage, observing them like insects under a microscope. They didn't recognize me, not that I expected them to. Not after all these years. And certainly not in this context. To them, I was just the new landlord's representative, a faceless drone, a nobody, someone to be dismissed with a flick of the wrist and a sneer. Someone who could understand the subtle nuances of Prescott society? Preposterous. Reginald's gaze swept over me, dismissing me as irrelevant with the same casual indifference he might show to a discarded newspaper. As long as the rent check's clear, he said with a dry, humorless chuckle that sounded like rocks grinding together, I couldn't care less who owns this crumbling pile of bricks. Let them try to maintain it, though. They'll soon realize the error of their ways. He actually believed that some faceless corporation was going to be as inept as they were, failing to understand the legacy they were leaving behind. Such a fool. They had no idea. Not a clue. Zero. I took a sip of my water, the bubbles fizzing on my tongue like the anticipation building inside me, a subtle smile playing on my lips. Let them bask in their delusion of victory. Let them savor their fleeting moment of false security. They thought they had outsmarted the world, squeezed every last drop from their dwindling resources. They actually believed they were invincible, untouchable, immune to the consequences that plagued the common folk. But the foundations of their empire were built on sand, on debt and deception, and I held the tide in my hands. Their downfall wouldn't be loud, dramatic, or fueled by petty vindictiveness. It would be quiet, calculated, and ultimately transformative. They said I'd never amount to anything. Now I was their landlord. And I was about to show them what that truly meant. Serafina Bellwether. That was the name they knew. Or rather, the name they thought they knew. A charity case. A scholarship student at Prescott Academy, the boarding school synonymous with privilege, pedigree, and the kind of casual cruelty that only the truly wealthy could afford. I was an anomaly, a speck of dust in their pristine, polished world. An unwelcome intrusion. A reminder that even their gilded cage wasn't entirely impenetrable. The Prescott family, particularly Reginald and his entitled offspring, made damn sure I never forgot my place. Barnaby, with his lazy insults and condescending smirk, always ready to remind me that my clothes weren't expensive enough, my family wasn't important enough, my very existence was a blight on their perfect landscape. Prudence, with her subtle social sabotage and pointed criticisms of my unrefined attire, always made sure that there wasn't a school dance invitation in sight. Penelope, well, she simply pretended I didn't exist, her nose perpetually buried in some designer magazine, her eyes carefully averted as if I were a particularly offensive stain on the carpet. I still recall the day they got a new maid after Penelope literally tripped over me in the hallway and didn't even notice that I was there. And Reginald, the patriarch, the puppet master, the quiet manipulator, whose disdain was a palpable force, always ready to remind me, with a carefully chosen word or a dismissive gesture, that I was not one of them. "You have potential, Serafina," Reginald would say, his voice dripping with thinly veiled contempt, like poison honey. "But potential is useless without the right connections, the right breeding. You'll never truly fit in here." He wanted me to remember that I was an outsider, and that no amount of hard work or academic achievement could ever change that fact. They thought they were so much better than me, but I was destined to prove them wrong. Their words stung, of course, like acid on an open wound. But they also fueled me, ignited a fire within me that burned hotter with each passing year. I was determined to prove them wrong, not by becoming like them, not by adopting their values or seeking their approval, but by exceeding them on my own terms. While they were busy attending polo matches and debutante balls, indulging in frivolous pursuits and vapid conversations, I was studying coding in the library, poring over investment books in the rare quiet corners, and learning the intricacies of the stock market in my spare time. I was building my own empire brick by brick, while they were tearing theirs down with their arrogance and ignorance. My grisly Scylla wasn't a secret inheritance or a powerful benefactor. It wasn't some magical connection or a stroke of unbelievable luck. It was my mind, my unwavering resilience, and a burning desire to not just survive in their world, but to thrive, to excel, to become something they could never even comprehend. I saw opportunities where they saw inconveniences. I learned to leverage my skills, to identify undervalued assets, and to make calculated risks that would have sent their pampered souls spiraling into panic. I started small, investing my meager savings in tech stocks, fueled by ramen and sheer determination. I devoured every book I could find on startups and venture capital, learning from the successes and failures of those who had come before me. I saw the future, and I knew it wasn't in inherited wealth or antiquated traditions, but in innovation, adaptability, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. My breakthrough came with the development of a unique algorithm for data analysis. It was revolutionary. It could decipher patterns and predict trends with uncanny accuracy. Efficient and highly sought after by the tech giants who were trying to make their own way in the world. I launched my own tech startup, Bellwether Analytics, and within a few years it was worth millions. I sold it for a considerable fortune, becoming a silent but significant player in the tech industry, a force to be reckoned with, even though they barely knew I existed. I knew that one day my path would cross with the Prescotts again. I imagined various scenarios, each more dramatic than the last, each playing out in my head like a scene from a revenge thriller. But ultimately, I realized that the most effective revenge wouldn't be revenge at all, but rather an act of mercy. It would be an opportunity for them to learn, to grow, to evolve beyond their outdated beliefs and understand the value of humility. And that opportunity presented itself when I learned that Prescott Manor and its surrounding estate, including the rental properties that supported the Prescotts' extravagant lifestyle, were on the verge of foreclosure. Bad investments, dwindling funds, and a desperate attempt to maintain their image of affluence had finally caught up with them, like a karmic tsunami. They were drowning in their own hubris. This was my chance. It was time to put my plan into motion. A plan years in the making, meticulously crafted, and poised to rewrite their fortune on my own terms. Buying up the Prescott estate was surprisingly easy. In fact, shockingly simple for the amount of money they were dealing with. I used a shell corporation, hiding my identity behind a labyrinthine network of lawyers and accountants, creating so many layers of anonymity that even the best sleuths would get lost digging through the information. The Prescotts were too preoccupied with their impending financial doom, too consumed by their own self-pity, to notice the subtle shifts in the market, the quiet acquisition of their assets by an anonymous entity. Blinded by their arrogance, they were oblivious to the trap closing around them. I assigned a trusted associate, Mr. Davies, a man of unflappable composure and unwavering loyalty, to act as my representative, handling the day-to-day management of the estate. He was instructed to be polite, professional, but firm. He was to collect the rent on time, enforce the terms of the lease, and generally make the Prescotts' lives interesting. Let's just say I wasn't against him adding a little bit of spice to their already chaotic daily routines. The Prescotts, of course, initially scoffed at the new management. They demanded special treatment, insisted on late payments, and generally treated Mr. Davies with the same condescension they had always shown me. I mean, it was routine. They'd mastered the art of belittling those they deemed beneath them. Do you know who we are? Barnaby sneered at Mr. Davies during one particularly heated exchange, his face contorted in a mask of entitled rage. We are the Prescotts. And this is our ancestral home. We don't take orders from the likes of you. The sheer audacity of it was almost comical. Mr. Davies, bless his heart, remained unfazed, his voice calm and steady. With all due respect, Mr. Prescott, the rent is due and late fees will apply. As for who you are, that is of little consequence to the terms of the lease agreement. I almost wish I'd been there to see the look on Barnaby's face. Their arrogance only grew as their financial situation worsened. They doubled down on their extravagant spending, clinging desperately to the illusion of wealth and power, throwing good money after bad. They hosted lavish parties, indulging in expensive hobbies, and continued to treat everyone around them with the same dismissive disdain. I'd almost called their behavior a parody of rich people, if it wasn't their actual reality. They seemed to believe that if they ignored the problem long enough, it would simply disappear, like dust swept under the rug. I watched from afar, through Mr. Davies's meticulous reports and occasional discreet visits to the estate disguised as a potential buyer, as their world slowly crumbled around them. I could practically taste the sweet sensation of their imminent failure. They were so blinded by their privilege, so convinced of their own superiority, that they couldn't see the cliff they were hurtling toward. And that was precisely how I wanted it. The annual Prescott Charity Gala was their last desperate attempt to salvage their reputation and raise funds, a pathetic display of forced merriment and hollow generosity. The ballroom was filled with the usual suspects. Aging socialites clinging to their fading relevance, opportunistic politicians angling for donations, and shallow philanthropists desperate to be seen and photographed, all pretending to care about a cause they barely understood while simultaneously judging each other's outfits. The Prescotts were putting on a brave face, but the cracks were starting to show, spiderwebbing across their carefully constructed facade like fissures in a dam about to burst. Reginald's hands trembled visibly as he raised his glass for a toast, his voice wavering with a mixture of desperation and denial. Barnaby's forced smile seemed strained, his eyes darting nervously around the room, searching for a lifeline that wasn't there. Prudence's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the worry lines etched around her eyes, revealing the years of stress and anxiety beneath the icy exterior. And Penelope, for once, seemed genuinely concerned, constantly checking her phone for updates on some last-ditch investment scheme, her carefully manicured nails tapping a frantic rhythm against the screen. As the evening progressed, I orchestrated my entrance. I had traded my understated attire for a stunning designer gown, a masterpiece of silk and lace that shimmered under the chandeliers, my hair styled in a sophisticated updo that accentuated the curve of my neck, and my demeanor exuded confidence, power and an aura of undeniable success. I was Serafina Bellwether, the successful businesswoman, the tech mogul, the one who had risen from the ashes of their contempt and built an empire of my own. The Prescotts stared at me, their faces a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. They recognized me, of course, but they couldn't reconcile the awkward, underestimated scholarship student with the poised, powerful woman standing before them. The transformation was too complete, too absolute. They couldn't fathom how the ugly duckling had become a swan. Reginald was the first to speak, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper. "Serafina? Is that really you?" I smiled, a genuine, knowing smile that held a hint of amusement and a touch of pity. "In the flesh, Reginald. Or should I say Mr. Prescott? After all, I am your landlord." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning and implication. The room went silent, the music fading into a distant hum. All eyes were on us, drawn to the unfolding drama like moths to a flame. The Prescotts were exposed, their carefully constructed facade shattered, their secrets laid bare. Barnaby sputtered, his face flushing crimson. "Landlord? What are you talking about?" I gestured towards Mr. Davies, who stepped forward, holding a stack of legal documents bound together with a pristine ribbon. "Ms. Bellwether is the owner of Prescott Manor and all surrounding properties, including the rentals that the Prescott family so heavily relies upon." Davies's voice was so crisp and clean like a freshly starched shirt. I had trained him well. The shock on their faces was priceless, a masterpiece of frozen horror. Reginald's face turned a shade of purple I didn't know existed, like a spoiled plum, his eyes bulging with disbelief. Prudence gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her meticulously crafted composure finally cracking under the pressure. Penelope dropped her phone, the screen shattering on the marble floor, a fitting metaphor for the destruction of their world. Barnaby simply stood there, dumbfounded, his jaw hanging open, his smug grin replaced by a look of utter bewilderment. "You," Reginald finally managed to croak out, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and despair. "You bought everything?" "Indeed, Reginald," I said, my voice calm and controlled, each word carefully enunciated. "I did. And I have some adjustments I'd like to discuss with you, starting with the terms of your lease agreement." The game had officially begun. The aftermath of the reveal was chaotic, a scene of hushed whispers, hurried exits and thinly veiled gossip. The gala quickly devolved into a feeding frenzy, as the social vultures circled, eager to pick apart the remains of the Prescotts' shattered reputation. The Prescotts were left standing in the middle of the ballroom, exposed, humiliated, and utterly alone. It was an amazing show, honestly. Their downfall was swift and complete, like a house of cards collapsing under its own weight. They were forced to downsize, give up their extravagant lifestyle, and face the harsh reality of their financial mismanagement. Barnaby had to get a real job, a humiliating prospect for a man who had never worked a day in his life. Prudence was forced to sell her designer clothes, auctioning off her prized possessions to make ends meet. And Penelope, shockingly, actually had to learn to cook, trading her caviar dreams for the reality of canned sardines. Reginald, stripped of his power and prestige, became a shadow of his former self. He retreated into the manor, a prisoner in his own ancestral home, spending his days reading old books and reminiscing about a past that would never return. He was lost to the world. The other members of their social circle, of course, abandoned them, their loyalty proving to be as shallow as their conversation. They were no longer useful, no longer desirable, no longer worth the effort of maintaining their connections. The Prescotts had become pariahs, a cautionary tale whispered among the elite, a reminder of what could happen when arrogance met reality. They were a disgrace. I didn't gloat, I didn't celebrate, although the temptation was definitely there. I simply watched, waiting to see if they would learn from their mistakes, if they would rise from the ashes of their former lives. I offered them opportunities, not handouts, but genuine chances to rebuild their lives, to contribute to society, and to understand the value of hard work and humility, offering a hand up, not a pat on the head. I offered Barnaby a position at one of my tech companies, not as a privileged executive, but as an entry-level programmer, forcing him to learn the basics, to earn his place, to understand the value of a hard day's work. Prudence, surprisingly, started volunteering at a local charity, using her organizational skills to help those in need, discovering a sense of purpose she had never known before. And Penelope, inspired by her new culinary skills, opened a small catering business, focusing on sustainable and locally sourced ingredients, actually making a positive impact on her community. Reginald, however, remained resistant to change, stubbornly clinging to his old ways, refusing to admit his flaws. But even he, in his own way, began to soften, to see the world with a new perspective, to appreciate the simple things in life that he had always taken for granted. Years later, I found myself back at Prescott Manor, not as a silent observer lurking in the shadows, but as a respected guest, welcomed with open arms. The Prescotts, while never fully abandoning their past, had undergone a significant transformation. They were no longer the arrogant, entitled family I had once known. They were simply people, flawed but striving to be better. Barnaby was a successful coder, contributing to innovative projects and earning the respect of his colleagues. Prudence had dedicated her life to helping others. Penelope was a respected chef. And Reginald, though still a bit cantankerous, had found a newfound appreciation for the simple things in life. We sat in the garden, sipping tea and reminiscing about the past. There was no animosity, no resentment, no lingering bitterness. Only understanding and a shared sense of growth. The wounds had healed. "Thank you, Serafina," Prudence said, her voice sincere, her eyes filled with gratitude, "for giving us a second chance." I smiled. "You earned it. You all did." They weren't the perfect version of themselves, but they were better. That's all that mattered. Their story, our story, is a reminder that true wealth isn't measured in money or status, but in character and resilience. It's a lesson that humility is a far more valuable asset than arrogance, and that even the most hardened hearts can be softened by understanding and compassion. Never underestimate the power of quiet determination. And more importantly, remember that true success isn't about tearing others down, but about lifting them up. For it is in helping others that we truly find our own worth. In the end, revenge wasn't about destruction, but about transformation.